Yes, thank you. For the record, my name is Alexander McKenzie, and I'm a practicing lawyer in Winnipeg here. Mrs. Voth, would you mind stating your full name to the Commission?
My name is Martha Voth.
Thank you. And do you promise and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Mrs. Voth, you reside in Niverville,
Yes.
and you, I beg your pardon, on May the 24th of 2021, you tested positive for COVID, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. And you also were with your husband, Alvin, and he tested positive as well.
Yes.
Okay. You yourself had symptoms?
Not as much by that time. I was on my way getting better.
I see. And how about your husband?
No, he was not. He was having difficulty breathing, and he had no energy, but he went to get tested so he could go back to work.
I see.
Nothing could keep him down.
I see. And what did he do for a living?
He was a flooring specialist, so he installed flooring for 50 years.
And he was very physically active.
Very, and it's a rigorous job, so he had to be physically fit to do it, and he still worked 5 days a week.
And he was 66 years old at that
Yes.
time, is that correct? You say that he was becoming ill. He had symptoms that were flu-like, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And on May the 26th of 2021, what did you do as a result of that?
Phoned the Walmart walk-in clinic, because we wouldn't have been able to get into the clinic in Niverville without an appointment. But at the walk-in we would, and he simply prescribed a drug, an antibiotic for him, which he sent to the Niverville pharmacy, was picked up by our daughter, and she dropped it off at our door.
I see. The Walmart drop-in was in Steinbach.
Steinbach, yes.
And so you got the prescription, and then what happened then on May the 27th?
Well, it seemed that he was getting progressively worse. He couldn't walk very well because of the breathing difficulty. And so I called the walk-in to ask if we could come in, and they said no, we couldn't, because I admitted we tested positive for COVID. They said we had to go to emergency in Steinbach.
And that's the Bethesda Hospital.
Bethesda Hospital, yes.
And Alvin then was speaking and breathing with some difficulty.
Yes.
So you drove him then to Steinbach,
Yes.
to the hospital. And how was he feeling then?
Well, he opened the window on the drive in, which gave him a lot of fresh air. And by the time we got to emergency, he admitted to me that he was feeling so much better because he'd gotten a lot of fresh air. Mm-hmm. I went in, got a wheelchair so he wouldn't have to walk, and brought him to the registration desk. We got him registered, and we were then put into a plexiglass cubicle where we sat and waited till they admitted him, which was about 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then when they did admit him, they said I could not stay in the waiting room, I had to go home. And I said because I'd driven a bit of a distance, I wasn't going to go home, I was going to wait in my car till they released him and I could take him home. And so I sat in the car about 45 minutes before they called me and said they were going to admit him and keep him overnight. And that's when I went home.
I see. And then you were at home, and at around 7 o'clock you received a phone call, is that correct?
Yes, it was later on in the evening. I would say it was more like 9 or 9:30. They said they had put him on oxygen. His oxygen level was at 58, which is pretty low. But with a mask on, the oxygen level did come up. And they just wanted to let me know that he was very, very sick, and they were going to send him either to Brandon or fly him to Ontario. And
Okay.
I just said, no, you're not flying him there, and you're not bringing him to Brandon. We want to keep him close to home. so that we could go get.
Brandon is about a 3-hour drive.
Yes,
Is that correct?
yes.
And that would have been very hard for you to see him there.
Right.
And of course, Ontario would be
Yes.
an airplane trip.
Right,
So you objected to that?
yes.
And what were you told?
They were going to try and get a room somewhere in Winnipeg, but they said all the hospitals were full and didn't actually have room, but they were going to try. And they said they were in contact with HSC.
No,
to see if
HSC is the Health
Health
Sciences
Science
Center
Center, yes.
in Winnipeg, which is
Yes.
about a 40-minute or 1-hour drive.
Yes. Yeah.
And then, was there anything else that occurred that day on May the 27th?
No.
And on May the 28th, can you tell us what happened then?
My husband called me in the morning, asked me to bring the batteries for his hearing aid and his cell phone charger. And I asked him how his night had gone. He said it was good, he had slept well. And I said, and how do you feel this morning? He said, I feel good, because he was getting the oxygen he needed and he felt good.
And how was he getting the oxygen?
Just with a face mask.
I see. Now, you had been asked to bring the cell phone charger and batteries, and so what were you doing then? You were preparing to go?
I was trying to get ready, but I kept getting calls, and so was a little slow at getting ready. But then the doctor called and informed me that they were going to ventilate him. And I said, no, well, why are you going to ventilate him? Why are you rushing this? And he said, well, we're not actually rushing it. We would have done it last night because he was dangerously low in his oxygen. And I said, okay, so wait till later in the day to see how the day goes. Well, no, because they didn't have enough oxygen for him, and he needed 60 liters per minute, and they just didn't have enough oxygen.
Okay, now just stop a moment. He had been getting oxygen.
Yes.
His oxygen levels were up. He had said he was feeling much better.
Yes.
Yeah. And so they were wanting to ventilate him. What did that have to do with the amount of oxygen?
If they ventilated him, the oxygen would go directly into the lung, and they wouldn't need as much oxygen to keep his levels up.
And so what, in terms of the ventilation, did you get to speak to him about that? That is, to Alvin, your husband?
Well, after the doctor had explained to me why they had to ventilate him now instead of waiting, one of the reasons was the anesthesiologists only had 8-hour shifts and were going to go home after their 8-hour shift. And if anything drastic happened and he did need to be ventilated, nobody would be around to do it, and then he would die.
So then they were going to take him off the mask where he seemed to be doing not badly.
Right.
And they were going to ventilate him.
Yes.
And the reason for that was an oxygen shortage partly.
Yes.
And also partly because their staff would be gone who could install the ventilator.
Right.
And also partly because they'd called an ambulance.
Right. That was another reason why they had to do it now, because the doctor had already called STARS, which is the emergency medical team that picks people up and flies them to different locations.
I see.
So because he had called them 20 minutes prior to my call, I said, I can't get there in 20 minutes. And he said, well, they'll be here in 10 minutes. And I said, well, I'm just not ready to get there. Like, just hold off. Well, no, we cannot waste their time because they're flying all over Manitoba picking people up, so we can't waste their time.
And so again, what is the distance from Niverville in time, from Niverville to Steinbach?
Half hour.
Half an
20
hour.
minutes, half hour.
So the STARS was going to be there in 10 minutes, and it would have taken you
At least half hour to get there, yes.
And so what happened next?
Then my husband called again, and again, he sounded great. He sounded normal, and he asked, when are you getting here? And I said, I can't get there before STARS gets there. And then I asked him, I said, are you okay with going on a ventilator? He said, I don't know. I have nobody to talk to about this. They just tell me whatever, but I don't know how to gauge whether I should go on it or not. So.
And he very much wanted to be able to speak with you about that. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
However, you didn't get there, and he was moved from the Bethesda Hospital to the Health Sciences Center by STARS.
Yes.
Yes. Did you become aware of any conversation that the STARS attendees had? Were you ever told of any conversation that is significant?
Yes. A doctor called from the hospital in Steinbach and let me know that they had discussed to let me into my husband's room there in Steinbach because I had also had COVID. But then I talked to him about the ventilator because he had told me he was ventilated and he's on his way to Health Science Center. And I talked to him about why did he need to go on it? Why couldn't he just stay on the mask? And then the nurse informed me that the STARS attendees, and my understanding is that STARS has their own doctor that they fly with, that they had questioned the staff in my husband's room asking, why are you ventilating him? He seems like he's doing fine. His oxygen level is up with the mask. He got up on his own out of bed and went to the bathroom. He is cooperating. He's not feeling sick as such. Why are you ventilating him? I don't know what their answer was.
Yeah, you've never received an answer to that?
No, I just the doctor's reasoning for ventilation.
Okay. Now, then at some point after Alvin had been moved, you got a call from the Health Science Center, is that correct?
Yes.
And what were you told there about your attendance and so on?
Well, even though he was close, not in Brandon or Ontario, they still were not going to allow us to go in to see him. But we could set up Zoom calls or video calls with him. And I kind of vetoed that idea because I didn't think there was a point to it. He wasn't responsive anyway. He was in a drug-induced coma. I didn't see the point of it.
And that was all on the day that he got moved from
Yes.
Bethesda to the Health Sciences
Yes.
Center. And then the following day, on May the 29th, you got another call from the Health Science Center. Is that correct?
Yes, it was by the doctor. He informed me of Alvin's condition and just saying that he was very sick and didn't think he'd make it.
Mm-hmm. And was there anything further to your discussion that day that you can recall?
Well, I asked him to put him on the drug that, and I'm not a medical expert, but that everybody seemed to think was working well, the off-label drug called ivermectin, and he said, no, we only use scientifically and medically proven drugs that work.
I see. Okay. And then, was there anything else to that conversation?
No.
Okay. Then on May the 30th, again, this is all in 2021, you requested regular video calls. You took
Yes.
them up on their offer, is that
Yes.
correct? And was that arranged for you, and how did that work?
Yes, they said they would start the next day with video calls.
And during that time, too, I understand that you had regular calls and discussions with the medical staff at the Health Sciences Center as to Alvin's condition?
Every morning I called to see how the night had gone. Every evening I called to see how the day had gone. And about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the kids and I would do a video call with him, being in a comatose state. We would sing, we would talk about our day, and we would pray with him. And generally it was about an hour-long call.
Okay. And in those conversations, I understand you had the video calls, but you also had conversations with Health Science Center staff, is that correct?
Yes, they informed me what they were doing to him and with him every day. One of the nurses in particular was very kind, would speak to him, would turn his face to the sun in the window, and then they started to tell me that his condition improved when they proned him. And proning means turning him on his stomach. And all the numbers on the machines would be better if they proned him.
Okay. And did they tell you any disadvantage to proning?
No.
Okay. And so if he was lying on his back, as I understand what you're telling us, is that if he was lying on his back, he would have less strong vital signs than when he was lying on his stomach. Is that correct?
That was my understanding, because when they did prone him, his numbers always were better on the machines.
Okay, thank you. And then these calls went on through to June the 7th or June the 8th. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And then on June the 8th, you got a call from the Health Sciences Center.
Yes.
Is that right? And what were you told then?
They said that all the ports and the needles that were in his body for all the medications and things were badly infected, and now they were dealing with a new infection in his blood that was causing his organs to shut down. And
what were they going to do to try to resolve that?
they were going to try and find new places for all the ports and needles. And they said they would have to work on it all day, and he was in a very bad place.
I see. And then on June the 10th, you were called again from the Health Sciences Center.
Yes, they wanted us to come in so we could agree with them to put him in comfort care.
And what did you understand that the words comfort care meant?
Kind of in palliative care, where they don't actively work anymore to get him better.
Okay, thank you. And so I understand that on June the 10th, then you, two daughters, you have three daughters, two of your daughters and your son attended the Health Sciences Center. Is that correct?
Yes.
And your other daughter attended by video?
Yes.
She? Yeah. Were you masked when you attended?
No.
I understand you saw some sign on the door on the 10th when you
Yes.
attended. And by the door, I mean the door to the room in
To
which
his room.
Alvin was
Yes. It said COVID recovered.
COVID recovered.
Yes.
And what do you, in terms of Alvin's condition, how do you square the sign COVID recovered on the one hand and the fact that he's getting worse on the other hand?
Well, it was the infection that you can get only in ICUs, like a
It was the infections.
sepsis.
It was the infections and sepsis.
Yes.
That was the problem for him, not COVID.
Yes, not
anymore.
COVID.
Was Alvin on his back or on his stomach?
He was on his back. And we were there for a few hours, 2 or 3 hours, before we actually had the meeting with the doctor and some of the nursing staff, the chaplain.
And so you had been in Alvin's room, and you were
Yes,
sitting
couple
with him
hours.
for a time with your children.
Yes,
And then you went to another room, is that correct?
right.
And who was in that other room?
It was the doctor, together with the head nurse and some of the nursing staff, and a chaplain.
And in those discussions, did the issue of comfort care come up again?
Yes.
And how did that come up?
He told us how bad the situation was and that his organs were failing, and their suggestion was that he should be put in comfort care. And so I said, it's too bad that you cannot give him that drug, ivermectin. And he said, no, we don't use that here. And then I said, well, could you prone him, and would his numbers be better then? And
So
he said,
you asked for him to
yes,
be proned?
Yes. And he said, yes, it has improved when we do prone him, but he could have a massive heart attack, and then it'd be over. And I said, but he has a good, strong heart.
So-
And he said, yes, he does.
So on the one hand, they're saying that he is not going to survive
Right.
for more than a few hours, yet they're afraid to give him the internectin because it might hurt him, and they're afraid to prone him because it might hurt him. Is that what I understand from you?
Yeah,
Thank you. It's hard for me to understand that. In any event, they did prone him, did they?
yes.
And-
We were left alone in that waiting room to discuss whether we wanted him proned or put on comfort care. And it was a no-brainer, we wanted him proned, because we still believed in a miracle. So when we went back to the nurse's station, and the same people that were in that waiting room were around the nurse's station, and we told them we had decided we wanted him proned. And they said, okay, they had to get a few people out there to help with that. So then I asked the doctor, you know and I know, it's scientifically and medically proven that when a baby is born and doesn't have any human touch, that the baby dies. And he said, yeah, that's true. And I said, don't you think that if we spent time in his room touching him, talking to him, and that we were there physically instead of video calls, that he would improve? And he said, yes, I believe that. But he said, I can't make that decision. And he turned his head and looked at the head nurse and said, can we make that happen? And she said, no, it's not our protocol.
Okay. And by this time, had Alvin been proned?
No, that was just
See, that
before.
was just before he was prone.
Yes,
So you had asked to be able to stay at Alvin's bedside and
well, we
offer
just
him-
thought we were there, so we thought we may as well just stay
Right.
as long as we possibly could.
to talk to him,
Yeah,
to sing to him in
Yeah.
person,
Yes.
to hold his hand,
yes,
to do those things in the hopes that it might revive him.
yes.
Yeah. And you were told, it's
Well, after they proned him, then the nurse said, well, now you can't be in his room anymore, because now his numbers are better.
so you could, so just so that, I believe I understand every word you say, but so long as he was on the edge of death and going to die, you could stay for comfort
Yes,
care.
yes,
But the moment it looked like he might live, you had to go.
yes.
Okay.
And then the nurse did say, well, I will allow you to stay 1 more hour, but then you have to leave.
Now, you did, I believe you recalled to me some specific words that were spoken to you when you asked if staying there might help, and the doctor asked the nurse if that would be possible, and the doctor was told, what were those words?
No, it's not our protocol.
And then, and so you left with your children
Yes,
and went home. I understand that on June the 11th, you continued your video calls,
yes,
and they continued right through to June the 24th.
yes,
And each day, you and some of your family would sing and talk to your husband, Alvin,
yes,
and that each morning and each evening, you would call and get updated information from
Yes.
the Health Sciences Center. Now, on June the 22nd, you received a call from the Health Sciences Center.
from the doctor,
Yeah, and that was Dr.
Claire Ramsey.
Claire Ramsey. And what were you told?
She said that he didn't have very long, that his condition he was in really, really bad condition. All his organs had shut down by that time because of the massive infection that was running through him. And I asked her if his condition was strictly due to him being in their ICU? And she said, yes, you only get this infection in the ICU. And that's what was killing him.
Now, on June 25th then, you received yet another call from the hospital, is that correct?
Yes, they said he wouldn't make it the day.
He would not survive for the day. He would not make it. He would die that day.
Yes.
You were told you would be allowed to come in again, is that correct?
They asked us to come in, yes.
And so what did you do?
The girls and I went in because our son was doing concrete and he was in the middle of a pour and it's sensitive work, so he couldn't leave. He was trying to get somebody to do his job, but he couldn't find anybody, so he had to wait till the concrete set. So we went in, the girls and I went in, we got there shortly after lunch.
That is you and your 3 daughters, yes?
Yes.
And again, your son could not attend, not because he didn't want to, but
No,
because
he was
in the
trying
middle
hard.
of pouring concrete.
Right.
Yeah.
He was trying hard to get there.
Okay.
And we were there all afternoon, and the nurse kept coming in to ask when the son was going to be there, because she said, he's going to die any minute. He's going to, but I mean, the machines were still all on him, so.
What did she tell you about keeping the machines on?
She said, you're not doing him any favors by keeping him on these machines. In fact, it's worse for him to be on all these machines.
And you arrived about what time? About
1 o'clock in the afternoon, somewhere in there.
And I understand that your son did finally arrive at around 7.
He finally came at 7, yes.
And I understand also that then you and your family were allowed to sit with your husband.
Yeah, we were there in his room all afternoon and then all evening. And at some point, the kids decided to go get some food.
And you had one of your children, you have 3 daughters.
Yes.
One of your daughters' name is Rebecca, is
Yes.
that correct? Yeah. And you were about to say that your children decided to get up and go have a bite to eat while you were going to remain with Alvin.
Yes.
And what happened then?
As they were walking, Rebecca, who is our youngest, she was pregnant, but she started bleeding, and she had a miscarriage because of the stress of that day.
And I understand that you did stay with your other children. Rebecca went home, and that she nonetheless stayed for much of the time on the phone, that you
Right.
made a phone connection so that she would be there too.
Yes.
Now, that went on until past midnight on the 25th, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And then tell us what happened then.
Well, we went back and forth trying to decide, should we keep the machines on and wait for a miracle or take them off and wait for a miracle? And so we went back and forth all that time to try and decide what to do, because of course you want him to live, right?
But you also hoped for a miracle.
Yes.
And so sometimes different of your family would think time to take him
Yes.
off, and other times people would change their minds.
Yes.
And ultimately, though, you made a decision.
We made a decision after midnight to take him off all the machines.
And so I'm presuming you called then the medical staff?
Yeah. Yes.
And just tell us about what happened then.
Well, they had promised us that when they would take all the machines off, they would take the ventilator, the hose out of his mouth so that he would look normal right at the end. And when they did come in to do that, they said no, they would leave part of that hose in his mouth because there could still be a particle of COVID in his lung. And then we would be at risk. My kids and I would be at risk. And if they took it all out and we were in the room, then they would have to fumigate the room, and that would take at least half an hour, and he would be gone before that time.
So they were still worried about COVID and you're getting COVID, and
Right.
that was foremost in their mind in
Yeah.
terms of.
So they said, well, unless you had the N95 masks, we couldn't stay in there. And we said, okay, we'll wear those masks. Well, we didn't fit right. They wouldn't fit right on our faces. And so we said, well, they had promised that we could stay, and we were going to stay. And we were not going to, and they had to take that hose out. So the nurses walked out and discussed it and came back in and said, okay, if we took the N95 masks, we could stay in the room. So that's what we did.
And then they proceeded to?
They proceeded to take all the machines off, unplug everything, and whatever air was in his lungs from the ventilator just puffed out in 3 puffs. And then 7 minutes later, his heart had stopped.
I feel almost foolish asking this question, but I've been asked to ask it. Is what you think should have been done differently?
Well, he did have pneumonia from the COVID and a blood clot. And in my opinion, if they could have just treated that, which they did, and they later on admitted that wasn't even a big deal, the pneumonia or the blood clot. But if they could have just kept him on the mask instead of the ventilator, things, in my opinion, would have turned out different.
Thank you. Martha, I'm going to just have the commissioners ask you any questions they might wish to ask.